Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Happy episode 26.
Huh. That remains to be seen.
I guess.
Did it?
I guess
Did
so.
it? It's happy or not. Happy. I hate it. Happy birthday. Don't tell me what to do. Anyway, go. I mean,
It's good to be with
that's
you
not,
again.
that's not funny.
No, it's not funny. Most of your jokes aren't funny.
I know. And I know that's not true. My jokes aren't funny. I'm funny.
Oh, really? Oh my gosh.
Sorry. Let's
This
go.
is exciting. We are on a journey. We have been talking about lots of different things as we've been recording. Most recently, the way of the rabbi, as we have been talking about things that don't move, and going back to some of your iconic messages and some things I beg you to talk about because they're iconic to me, not necessarily because I was present for some of these messages you shared, but because they shaped the church I grew up in and really shaped me. And I know
What church did
many.
you grow up in? Oh, I don't know. Open door.
It was this really weird place.
I know.
I don't like to talk about it.
Okay, I get it. Go ahead. Sorry.
But we have been going through the way of the rabbi. And as we've been talking about the way of the rabbi and what it means to follow him, it brought us to the Beatitudes in a roundabout way. And here we are in the second episode of the Beatitudes. And we're going to be in Blessed Are Those Who Mourn. And you're really hoping not to screw this one up, aren't you?
Yeah, because this is an important one. Yeah, I'm hoping not to screw it up.
We're hoping this one goes well.
Yeah.
So the great thing about these Beatitudes is they've continued to, or your messages around them, it's not just about the message in the scripture, but there's also this bigger story of what was happening in your life, what was happening in the life of the church. And as we start connecting with people that were a part of these messages and a part of this time when you all of this was kind of being revealed to you and you were preaching it, there's all these stories underneath and the meaning of what was happening in our world and in people's lives. I mean, it's just, there's so many layers. So will you start us off and share, well, you actually have your original notes.
I do. And for a reason, I'll get to that in a second, but it is a little weird. I mean, it's gratifying to me that a sermon and sermons, things that we thought 30 years, whenever, 1986 was when I preached the Beatitudes, that there was obviously no way that anyone would know that would just become part of how we think. It became part of our DNA as a church. And I think it didn't change how we thought. I think sometimes we find words to finally go, that's it. That's what we mean by living in the kingdom. And this is what has changed my life anyway. The thing that's interesting behind the scenes relative to Blessed Are Those Who Mourn. Last episode, I talked about the fact that I started the Beatitudes. The first sermon of the Beatitudes, Blessed are the poor in spirit, or Blessed are those who mourn, was preached. It was the last Sunday that we were in the Crystal Building. And what's around that is a whole lot of change. I'd been there 6 years. We had finally begun to get some traction. The church was beginning to grow, and the elders that were surrounding me and I was with, we were all on the same page for the first time. And so there was this kind of sense of, okay, now we're not fighting about dumb things anymore. We're fighting about how to do this the best possible way. And so things were beginning to grow. And one of the big things was we had outgrown the Crystal Building. We were pushing 600 people. There was no chance in the world we wanted to build. We were drawing people who were not wealthy, and it just wasn't where we were. But we needed more room, and so we made this kind of unorthodox decision to leave this church building that we already had at 45th and Florida, in the middle of Crystal, this little neighborhood, and go rent space in a school to accommodate a bigger group of people, which is very weird because usually you start a church in a school, which is why a lot of people think Open Door, I started Open Door. Open Door started in 1940. I came to a church that was in a little building in Crystal, and it grew. And then we moved to the school to accommodate more space. Anyway, so the last Sunday at the Crystal building, I can still see it in my mind and all the people there and where certain people even sat. The next Sunday, we were going to Cooper High School, which was like, holy cow. I mean, I felt like I was like a bird set free from a cage. I was no longer behind this huge throne of a pulpit. And, but also there were people who were kind of thinking, this is the end. This is not a church anymore. We're blah, 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 blah. And, but there's a lot of excitement. Overall, there was just this whole bunch of excitement. And we were so committed to this expository thing that I did at the time, like kind of Nazi, like, you can't change that. So
verse by verse.
I'm not going to change. So I'm, my Christmas sermon, what are you going to preach for Christmas? I don't know what the next verse is. Our Christmas sermon this year is in Lamentations. Anyway, like that. And so I'm kind of stuck with this first day at Cooper High School. Everybody's going to be excited. Actually, every Sunday we had more people. I think we met at Cooper High School auditorium. It was just a whole lot of energy. And my text is, blessed are those who mourn.
Whoa!
I know, yeah! Let's talk about being bummed. And I remember thinking, here we go again, Open Door, just doing this. Wow, man. And honestly, my instinct is, this should be something about Joshua possessing the land, cross the Jordan. Let's talk about the impact we're going to have. Let's talk about how this is a step of faith. And it was all a step of faith. And let's just kind of, celebrate a little bit. I think I would maybe do that now. But it dawned on me somewhere in the week, and I think I had some people around me going, dude, there's nothing, you couldn't have a better text than this one on this Sunday, when we all want to celebrate, to remind us of actually who we want to become. And that's where the notes, I pulled out these original notes. That's 1986. You can't read it, but you can kind of get the gist. It's a mess. But this is what I said relative to how weird it was to be talking about this. We're at Cooper High School. I just reflected on, it'd be better to be doing something by Joshua, possess the land. And then I said, beloved, nothing could be more appropriate for this people on this Sunday than this text. Because as we enter this new day of growth and change and whatever it is, the question that we're all going to ask is, what kind of church will we become? And it's not even intentionally become, but when you change, things change. So you're kind of nervous. What are we going to become out of this? And are we going to be a big one? Are we going to be successful? Are we going to be a well-known church, a rich church, an innovative church, a miracle church? What will characterize us? Then I asked, what do you want to characterize us? To be big, successful, cutting edge, do it right? Or what if what we wanted was that Open Door is full of broken, dependent, mourning, hungry people who don't care about how big it gets, how successful it is, how innovative we are. What if we just want to be like the King, just want to be the salt of the earth, become the light of the world, a city that's set on a hill cannot be hid. And if that's what's in your heart, if that's what you want to become, then stick around. And some people did. And then I went into this thing on blessed are those who mourn. And let me just now get into the text. And it all began, as I said last week, in Matthew 4, verse 12, where it says, when John was taken into custody, John the Baptist was taken into custody, I called it the divine starter gun of history. It was as if the ministry of, not as if, but the ministry of Jesus began. Everything up till Matthew chapter 4, verse 12 was preparation for Jesus' ministry, his birth, his baptism, his experience in the wilderness. When John was taken into custody, he withdrew into Galilee, and from that moment on, he began to proclaim that the kingdom of heaven is within your reach. In verses 18 to 22, and by the way, last week I said that it was chapter 4, which is what I'm in right now, opened up my understanding of the Beatitudes in chapter 5. So he's beginning his ministry, 18 to 22, verses 18 to 22. He begins to call his disciples to himself. Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew, his brother, were mending nets. Come follow me, and they did. Verse 23, he begins to do his ministry, as it were, and it's characterized by two things. He proclaimed the kingdom, saying, this kingdom of God, it's not heaven when you die. This kingdom life is within your reach. It's right here, right now. And the second thing he did was demonstrate the power of the kingdom, meaning he was healing all sorts of diseases and sicknesses among the people. And the miracle aspect of it, the results of that miracle stuff was pretty predictable, because when the miracles are happening, news spread and multitudes came. So now we're at the end of chapter 4. The multitudes are there. People have been healed. He's the first church of what's happening now. And seeing the multitude, and we've talked about this several times, Jesus had this strange relationship with the multitude, because sometimes the multitude, when he would clarify what he meant, would withdraw from him. But sometimes he would withdraw from them for a variety of reasons. Chapter 5, verse 1, seeing the multitude, he withdraws from them. And he went up onto the mountain, and his disciples followed him. And after they sat down, he began to teach them, saying, and this is where the Beatitudes turns for me. He began to teach them, saying, I've got some good news and some bad news. The good news is that everything you heard me talk about in chapter 4, he didn't say chapter 4, but, relative to the kingdom being within your reach, the power of the kingdom, healing and casting out demons, all of that stuff is real, and all of it's for you. That's the good news. The bad news is none of it is going to come the way you think. None of it is going to come to who you think or through who you think, because it's not going to, this kingdom life and power is not going to come to those who look good and know how. And that kind of person would be embodied by the religious elite of Jesus' day, the Pharisees, who looked good and knew how, but it was this external show. They polished the outside of the cup and of the bowl. It's going to be coming actually and going to be available to people who don't look good and don't know how. Even more importantly, they know they don't look good and don't know how, which means they're going to be really hungry for this life. They're going to be they're not like the Pharisees. Why would I want that life? I already got it together. Look at my cup. It's all polished. This kingdom life that I'm talking about is real, but it's only going to come to those who don't look good and don't know how, and know they don't look good and know they don't know how. That's what I mean by blessed are the poor in spirit, who know they can't save themselves, sanctify themselves. They can't. And the I can't can turn into, like we said last week, this I can't, and they just give up. The energy of blessed are the broken is that when I realize I can't, blessed are the weakness is, if it just stays weak, it's weak. Weakness that turns to, because I can't, I become dependent on God. I glorify in my weakness. Weakness becomes dependence on God, and dependence is power. Blessed are the poor in spirit. That was last time. And then the next beatitude is the one we're trying to get to. Now we'll finally get to it. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who mourn, which almost every one of the Beatitudes I presented as like having a struggle with it. Like, in what way is it good to mourn? I mean, it doesn't sound like, it sounds like blessed are the bummed. Sounds like happy are the sad. And that's weird, because I always thought the happy are the happy. I don't know, just me. But this is one of the places where simply defining the word brings some clarity, because the Greek word here is penthos. And at the basic level, it simply means to grieve, to sorrow, or to mourn, which all by itself doesn't help us, because, well, that's what I thought it meant. Here's where it kind of opened up, and I got a kick out of this. It's weird, because I remember being in my office going, there's 9 Greek verbs for the concept of mourning. And my dad's a pastor, and my dad would use the Greek from time to time. But most of what I heard was there's 3 Greek words for love, but there's actually 4. And you hear that, and you go, wow, that is so cool. Actually, there's 9 Greek verbs for everything. So when you realize that there's 9 Greek verbs for the concept of mourning, all of a sudden I have something to dial into. What is this? What is penthas meaning? I mean, there's a lot of words that Greek words that would mean sorrow, mourning, that kind of thing. But penthas had a particular spin to it that opened it all up, because penthas was speaking to not just being sad or mournful, but penthas is an external expression of internal mourning. Which within the distinction there is this, and I think we all know it. It's possible you could have sad feelings and feel mournful and in grief, but if it doesn't get physically or somehow expressed, you have mourned, but you haven't done penthas. You haven't done this beatitude. So one of the ways we started saying it that was accessible was, blessed are those who get out here what's going on in here. Penthas is when you externally express the internal reality, whatever it may be. And once again, everybody knows, we all know it's possible to be sad, afraid, discouraged. It's possible to be depressed. It's possible to be stumbling badly into sin and look great. No one was. Big smiley face. I grew up in that environment, and maybe that's why I was sensitive to this thing, the joy of the Lord. We were always having the joy of the Lord, whether we had the joy of the Lord or not. We always looked like we had the joy of the Lord, and that meant a smile on your face. And if that smile on your face reflects what's going on inside, that's great. But here's the good news, bad news thing about blessed are those who mourn. The bad news is that people who have sadness, grief, depression, discouragement, doubts about God on the inside, but don't get them to the outside, they get no comfort. They just get to keep their sadness and grief. They have a happy face. The good news of the Beatitude is people who get out here, the sadness, the grief, the doubts, even about God, all the things that they think, I'll get kicked out of church if I tell them I think this or did that. Blessed are those who get out here, what's going on in here, because, and emphatic in the Greek, they're the only ones who get the comfort. Because if you don't get out here what's going on in here, you get to keep what's going on in here. So this thing is true on a number of levels with sin. You know, when I kept silent about my sin, remember this Psalm 32, yeah. David is talking about Bathsheba. When I kept silent about my sin, it's all in here. My body wasted away. But when I confessed my sin, he was faithful and just to forgive. So when the sin, as horrible as it was, I mean, that's that principle right there. He got out here, what was in here, and you don't get comfort, you don't get forgiveness, healing, until you quit pretending you quit pretending that you didn't do something wrong. So it's at that level. Good Christians sometimes get the message, and maybe not so much anymore, but when I grew up, the subtle message, maybe unspoken message, was that good Christians don't struggle, they don't fail. Good Christians don't doubt. They don't get confused. They don't get depressed. They don't stumble into sin. And if they do, they don't tell. You just keep it quiet, go to church, put your Bible under your arm, and have the kids line up in your pew, and we all look really pretty, and we're all a mess, but we look good. And that's a really dangerous thing. It's weird when this thing kind of dawned on me, you start seeing it every place. Galatians Chapter 6, Paul is talking about the Judaizers, but he's talking about a group of people who in his words, are making a fair show in the flesh. They make a good show in the flesh. So meaning that what they show you, they look good. They make a good show in the flesh. And they look good. And I even like to say it this way. I mean, there's been times in all of our lives when we've done this. There's people who do this, spend enormous amounts of energy investing in how they look. And I don't mean just the shirt they're wearing, but the image they project, what people think of them. They just spend enormous amounts of energy they make a good, and they're doing it good. It's a good show, but it's a show. It doesn't necessarily reflect the real condition of their soul. And when you're in a system like that, what I came up with was this, again, because I grew up in this, but I remember making up this creed that if you are investing, and if you're a church or a family or a school or whatever, who's investing your energy and making a good show, what will be true of your family, church, system, whatever it is this, that how things look is what will matter most. But here's the problem. If you're in a system, family, church, school, whatever, relationship, marriage, if you're in a system where how things look is what matters most, how things actually are will never get dealt with, won't even get talked about. Why? Because how things look is what matters. And if we say out loud that something's wrong with our marriage, that won't look good. And so just keep it, we can just manage this surface, happy, snappy, whatever. It rhymed, but it didn't mean anything. And the other thing that dawned on me in that thing, it creates systems and families where it actually becomes more important that people think I'm happy than I'm actually happy. It becomes more important that I get people to think I think deep thoughts and that I really love God and that I'm really spiritual. It's more important that they think we have a good marriage than we have a good marriage. I remember, this is so long ago, being in a young marriage class when I was going to, here, we went to a church here locally. Bonnie and I were just newly married. And the thought that anybody who was struggling in their marriage would say it out loud, it would be like you were being disloyal to your mate. And I'm, and I'm thinking, it became more important that people thought you had a good marriage than you had a good marriage. Because if you really wanted to have a good marriage, you might actually go, excuse me, could we get some help to get out here? What's going on in here now? That maybe doesn't sound like a revolutionary thought now, but if you were in a system where how things looked as what mattered, and someone finally started saying it's not that great in here for me, that's like, whoa, what? Because I care more about really being happy than just looking happy. And can we talk about, or okay, let's say it's lust or sin. It becomes more important that I look like I don't struggle with lust than I don't struggle with lust. So if it becomes more important that I look like I don't struggle with lust, I pretend I don't. And guess what I get to keep? The lust and the addiction. And the hiding is what you do. Blessed are those who get out here what's really in here. Because when you get it out here, it'll scare the bejeebers out of you, because now everybody will know, and everybody who cares about how things look will maybe judge you. Oh, golly, that's a whole nother talk. But when you get out here, what's in here, that's where God can get it, and God can heal it. And that, by the way, that sermon on that day, that brings up the question, what kind of church you want to be? Want to be a big church? Want to be a church where everybody's happy, snappy? You want to be a church where people are getting out here what's in here, and when they do, it will be messy. You okay with that? Because when what really comes out here, what is in here, it comes out here, it'll be messy. But if they start coming out here with what's in here, you know what else will happen? Healing will happen. The kingdom will come. Grace will flow, and that's the kind of church. That's a kingdom church. The kingdom has come when people start doing that. And not, we had part of the story too, is people like, oh, well, it's what, people start vomiting on everyone, and in the name of, that's just what I felt. Okay, there's got to be some balance in here, but it's got to be another talk as well. Let me end with just a couple of stories, illustrations. One is has to do with Alice. Her name is Alice. She was my mother's younger sister, so she's my Aunt Alice. And Aunt Alice was a very angry woman. And just set the context, Aunt Alice is obviously my mom's sister. So my mom and my sister grew up in the same church. How things look is what matters, environment. So she was a very angry woman, but she was also a good Christian woman, which meant was that anger was not okay. And it was not only not okay to be angry, it was not okay to look like you were angry. So she never did. It's one of the things I remember about Aunt Al. She never looked angry. I don't think she ever swore. I never heard her swear. She smiled a lot, actually, even when she was angry. Passive aggressive. Even when she was even when she was angry, she smiled a lot, and it was just weird. I like picture being a 10-year-old kid, which is where this memory is coming from. There she is being angry, but she's smiling while she says a really mean thing, and I would be like, you're smiling, but you're saying this mean thing, which is really confusing. And then she was, oh, what do you mean? She told him just teasing. And I actually do remember this thing she said. She said to me once, oh, Dave, you just remind me so much of your Uncle Don. Doesn't that sound like a nice thing? Well, Uncle Don's a criminal, so. He wasn't a criminal, but in the family, he was kind of the black sheep and blah, blah, blah. Uncle Don was great, but it was clear, smiley face. You remind me of Uncle Don. You don't want to be like Uncle Don. Oh, I didn't know how to unpack all of that kind of stuff. So she never said a swear word. She always had a smiley face. She was a very angry woman. She became the embodiment of the psalmist who says, who describes people whose speech is smoother than butter, but their heart is at war. Their words are softer than oil, yet sharper than swords. And as a 10-year-old kid, that's kind of confusing, because like I said, she'd sometimes say these really nice things with a big smile that felt bad. And I didn't like her. I didn't like Aunt Alice. And then one day I heard her story. And this is this is a family tradition. It isn't anymore, but I would hear our family stories at funerals. I've asked other people, "Has that ever happened in your family?" Because the funeral's there, everybody's there, everybody has their little, they eat downstairs in the church kitchen someplace. Everybody leaves and the family's left and we sit around talking. And I'm this little kid and I'm just sitting on the edge listening to the talk. But this time they weren't talking about her angry. Everybody knew Alice was angry. This time they were talking about her pain, and I'd never heard about her pain. So I heard her story. I'm 10. Now I'm hearing the story of an 18-year-old kid, Aunt Alice. I wasn't even born yet, who went off to college. It was an extremely conservative college, Bob Jones University, known for their very stringent rules, upholding a high moral standard. So they carefully monitor the length of guys' hair and the length of the skirts, and you couldn't hold hands. So everybody's safe. Everybody's safe. Don't hold hands. But when she got pregnant her freshman year at that school, she was sent home in obvious disgrace. The family told nobody. Okay, she's living in Chicago. She goes off to college. Alice is in college. She gets pregnant in college. She gets sent home. My mom didn't know. Nobody knows that Alice is back living in the upper bedroom, attic bedroom of my grandma and grandpa's house. And she never left home. And finally, after the baby came to term, they brought her to a cat. I'm hearing all this stuff. I'm going, holy cow. They brought her to a Catholic hospital because at a Catholic hospital, no one would know her. And when the baby was born, they turned the baby over to these Catholic nuns, and she never saw her again, the baby again. But this lady named Alice smiled a lot. And she never looked angry. She was really angry. And sometimes really mean. So here's my question relative to all that. What if Alice and people like Alice would have been allowed somewhere along the line to mourn.
Mm.
And then found the courage to actually do it. Because there are environments where you're invited to say what you think, but then what could have changed maybe in her life if she would ever been given permission to mourn and then found the courage to do it? What do you think it would have sounded like? She's holding it all in. She's smiling all the time. She'd never say a swear word. She got pregnant. Nobody knows. She's got the baby. She doesn't ever see that kid again. I think there's some feelings there.
Mm.
And now she starts to mourn. What would it sound like? I wonder what it would have felt like. What would it have done? I think the kingdom would have come. I think a lot of people wouldn't have known what to do with it. But I think if okay, that's another thing about a kingdom church. Blessed are those who get out here. What's really going on in here? They alone get the comfort. But how many of you know? Maybe it's you. Who, when they did get out here, what was in here? They didn't get comfort.
Yeah.
They got condemned. They got, what? Shut up. Don't say that again. And a lot of people who do that make an unspoken vow, and I'll never do that again. I'll never do that again and never do it again. But my point around this, going back to this first Sunday at Cooper, I'm thinking, then don't call that a kingdom church. Mm. If you're in a church where when you say out loud what's really going on in here and you get shut up, call it a big church if you want. Call it evangelical church. I don't care what kind of church you call it. It ain't kingdom. There's no kingdom. Kingdom, you can spot it. Mm. It's when people who get out here, what's really going on in here, get comfort, there's the kingdom. And it isn't, minimizing. Oh, it doesn't matter. Yes, it matters. But now we know what to deal with and how to love you. And anyway, another story. This is the last one before the last one. I've told this one I've told almost too many times, but it's the story about my dad. And I think the most poignant time I told this was when Steve Weems was interviewing me it was the 30th anniversary of me being at Open Door. We sat on stools, and he asked me about my call into ministry. And I couldn't think of anything but this story. I was a sophomore in high school, and our home, till this point, was how things look as it matters. That's what my dad knew, that's what my mom knew, but they were beginning to break away from that, okay? I was a sophomore in high school, I didn't know that. I had a sister, about 5 years older, who was already, I was a sophomore in high school, she was already in college, and she was acting out and getting in trouble, and it was very visible, kind of embarrassing to the family kind of stuff that she was doing, and we were still in a religious system where if the pastor's kids are screwed up, then he could lose his job, so there's lots of tension in the house. And my dad brought me into his office one day in our house. I remember the room, and he sat me down and he wanted to know how I was doing. And I don't know if he said it like that, but what I remembered was, you don't really want to know. What you want to know is I'm okay, so you don't have to worry about me. Mm-hmm. And I also remember that the rule, I think we actually came up with this later, that you always, when you're in a system where how things look, you always say the right thing. You never say the real thing. If how things look, so if how things look, how you doing, Dave? Well, the right thing is, I'm doing great. I'm trusting Jesus, Dad. Don't you know I'm a sophomore? But for some reason, and again, I can't fill in all the blanks. I just know that there were some things, something had built trust-wise between my dad and me enough for me to, for some reason, not just say the right thing. I was a really angry kid, and I came out with a negative thing, and then I came out, how you doing? I was okay, and then something else, and then something else, and I ended up pretty much vomiting on my dad, anger and rage. And it wasn't actually at him. It was just all this stuff that had nowhere to go, blah, came out on him. And what happened was, when I was done, he didn't fix me, he didn't correct me, he didn't stop me, he wept.
Hmm.
And I thought aliens had abducted him and taken his body over. And I was saved that day. I mean, the connection to ministry, here's the connection. If my dad can handle the real me, that is sometimes an angry me, if he can handle the real Dave, maybe God can too. And I've never been angry again. Not true.
Liar.
It is a lie. You know what though? I'm not afraid of it.
Yeah.
I don't pretend. God can handle the real. There are appropriate places for it and not, but I wanted. I think that sent me into the ministry in this regard. That whole, it changed my perception of God, because I'm not going to pretend. I don't have to pretend anymore. I can bring to Him and be. He knows anyway. But blessed are those who get out here. What's in here, they get comfort. Blessed are those who with God are going, God, I don't even know if you're real. Out here is where we can get it. When it's in here, you get to keep it, and it doesn't ever go away. It grows. I just leave with another verse. This is so fun for me because I did this 1986, but then I keep preaching through the scripture and find these other places that say the same thing. And one place that I'm going is the same thing. It's 1 John 1:5. It says this: God is light, and in Him there is no darkness at all. Meaning there is no baloney, which is not the original Greek. You know that. Right? God is light. In Him there is no baloney at all. No shifting shadow. God's going to give it to you straight. God is the ultimate reality. Now, if you say you have fellowship with Him, this God who is the ultimate reality, He is light, and yet you walk in darkness. I used to think that meant, and yet you sin. That isn't what it means. If you say you have fellowship with God, who is the ultimate reality, light, and you walk in darkness, meaning not that you don't sin, meaning that you hide your sin in the dark, you lie about having fellowship with God, who is light, because you can't be in fellowship with light and hide at the same time. That's the same thing as blessed are those who mourn. If you consistently deny and hide and redefine your sin, it just, you can't do it because God is light and God would reveal all that stuff. And so it just brings me to questions: do you want to live in the light or do you want to live in the dark? It's a different way of saying, you want to live in the light, then start to mourn. Doesn't mean be bummed. It means start getting out here what's really in here. Start telling the truth about the junk. And when I kept silent about my sin, my body wasted away. But when I confessed my sin, healing came, and that's the gospel. It's the first thing out of Jesus' mouth. Blessed are those who mourn. So anyway.
It feels so impossible to even try. How do you close that up? All I keep thinking about as you're talking is the different ways that I watched that message. So I was 3 years old in 1986. Does that make you feel old?
Every time I look at you, I feel old. No, I'm teasing.
I wasn't even at Open Door, and I'm thinking about all these different ways that message grew your church. And I don't mean in numbers, I mean in ministries. I'm thinking about the ways that trickled down into a youth group that I grew up in, into prayer ministries, that classes, things that I attended, things that I didn't attend, and ways that this has shaped my family as well. The ways that in my pain growing up, when we came to Open Door, my family was just beginning a divorce journey. And so different ways that impacted and helped me and so many others. I mean, thousands of other people find healing by finally getting out the pain and the struggle and naming it and realizing that that is their pathway to Christ.
That's great.
As the American church, I feel like it's something that we don't get at often.
Well, one of the things
we think we find God through our success.
Oh yeah,
right?
Yeah.
And we actually really find God through our pain and our dependence.
And some of this, yes, and I love hearing that, because that's like a 3-year-old who didn't hear that message, but were a recipient of that in some ways, because I do think Open Door, not every person got it, but it became a place where when you told the truth about your stuff, your stock went up, it didn't go down. And you did what? Well, and then we had to bring some, not balance is the wrong word, but I mean, there were some people who began to think grace is so amazing that there aren't any consequences. Yeah, there are.
Yeah.
Grace is not the mattress at the bottom of the cliff that when you jump off, there's no consequence. No, if you commit adultery, there's grace for that, but you might lose your marriage.
Yeah.
But the only way you're going to get healed is if you quit hiding it and pretending, and I mean, it just is absolutely the truth. And yeah, and it's fun to hear how that. I probably knew that in some way, but that you experienced that, because it did become part of the culture. It did shape at least who we wanted to be. I think it matters what you want. You know, sometimes you get what you want. You want to be big? Okay, you can get that. You want to create a culture that you really, what we value is you being honest about your house, how arrogant you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm gonna like you a lot more if you would just get it out here so we could agree with you. No, sorry. Yeah, I'm ruining the talk now. There really was a basis that was pretty much established, because I don't think you could do this if you didn't understand grace. I mean, an understanding of grace never felt to me like license to sin. Like people would kind of come along and then we'd hear this, grace is so amazing, it doesn't matter. I never believed that. I never preached that. To me, grace meant I never have to hide.
Yeah.
I did screw up. And because there's grace, I can say it, so I don't have to keep it. And that's psychologically healthy. That's theologically sound. And I just can't get over that this can be missed sometimes when it's the first thing he said. That is Jesus about his ministry. Went up on a mountain, sat down, and here's the deal. It's for those who mourn. So anyway.
And I hope that in our next series, or not our next series, in our next episode, you can talk a little bit more about the emphatic in the Greek and what that means. It's like the linchpin that like just makes all this so golden. You mentioned it a little bit today, but hopefully we can talk about that more in the next episodes. So,
well, just
thanks, everyone.
Now.
Oh,
yeah.
what?
Well, just that the emphatic means they're the only ones. If you don't get it out here, you never will. Emphatic means this is like, anyway, we'll talk about it next time.
Yeah.
Sorry.
We'll unpack it.
Yep.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Yep.